They say a week is a long time in politics. Well, it's even longer time in CONCACAF. From the dizzying highs of a 2-0 win, the U.S. men's national team was force-fed a big slice of humble pie in Jamaica, while Mexico's problems went from bad to peor in Edmonton. Canada are top of the standings after 8 match days, and Panama don't know when they're beat. I, Mr. Heath Pearce, will be breaking down all of the November World Cup qualifying window action alongside Jimmy Conrad and Paramount Plus's Dre Cordero. Qué Golazo begins right now. Now listen, everyone. Welcome to the One and All show. And if you're watching live on YouTube, do your part to spread this video far and wide by simply liking the video and clicking subscribe. And hit us up in the live chat with your observations, questions, grievances, or whatever it is you need to get off your chest. But let's keep things as civil as possible. And one more thing before we get started, the Qué Golazo Twitter account is within touching distance of surpassing 3,000 followers, which we appreciate. But help us reach that milestone today by following at Qué Golazo Pod. Jimmy Conrad, Dre Cordero, what is going on, guys? Jimmy, we'll start with you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. As you can see with the sign behind me, I wrote, "No mommy's way, Mexico," because they had 2 games, 2 big games, 2 hard games away from home, the hardest games on their schedule, let's be honest. And they lost both of those, and it's kind of fun to see them absolutely lose their minds. They are like every single person. Maybe the players and coaches are fine, and I'm sure they're disappointed, of course. But everybody surrounding that is just, they can't be bothered right now. They're so highly emotional. I've got plenty of time for it, Heath Pearce.
Oh, I love it. Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Can I just say before we get into all of this that you guys have become my go-to U.S. national team podcast before and after every single one of these World Cup qualifiers. Honestly, I don't miss it. It's entertaining. It's insightful. So I love it. And it's not just because I'm part of it. That helps. But you guys are killing it. So
you're welcome on the show anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. That gets you a free pass in the door anytime you want. But I guess, Dre, let's start with you. Obviously, you've been deep in all of this from the very beginning. Canada beating Mexico, this fallout from Iceteca. What are you hearing in, whether it's in the vacuum that is Twitter or elsewhere, about this match, just about Mexico's sort of state of affairs? I mean, give me your take on things as they stand right now.
So it's a good thing that Mexican culture as a whole doesn't have a tendency to overreact to things, right?
No, very calm and collected.
Honestly, you would think it was like the U.S. after the TNT game last cycle, the way that the response has been. And I think there's reasons to be way more disappointed and smashing that red panic button based on the result and performance against the United States than against Canada. Because at least against Canada, they showed fight at the end. They clawed their way back into that game. Canada was really asking for time at the end of that, hanging from the crossbar. So I thought there was more of a response from Mexico there. What there isn't on that team is a lot of goals right now, because Raul Jimenez is obviously not at the level that you would expect from this Modi. Hasn't been, the go-to, volume goal scorer that they would like. They've got plenty of playmakers. Still have a good, solid squad. But against the better teams in CONCACAF, they're clearly struggling, especially away from home. But again, if I'm Mexico, if I'm the coaching staff, if I'm the fans right now, I like the fight that I saw against Canada. I hate the result. I don't like anything about what I saw against the United States, because I can't recall. You guys maybe know better than I can't recall a time when the U.S. looked that much better, that much more dominant than Mexico in official competition. And I don't think that there was quite that distance between the two teams in Canada. Throw in the elements. None of this is going to matter to them. Obviously, the narrative is like on a runaway train right now. But I think with some perspective, it wasn't as bad as the result is.
Yeah, Jimmy, for your take on this, I mean, do you think it was all of those factors, as Dre just mentioned, in terms of the conditions, the weather, all these things, just feels like Mexico's finally experiencing what I feel we talk about in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, right? The difficulties of a pitch, the difficulties of conditions. They're used to playing in adverse conditions, some of those players playing in Mexico are growing up in the Americas, so to speak, with the humidity and elevation of Azteca and these things. Do you feel like they're getting a taste of that medicine in a way that they haven't, or do you think this is just sort of a little bit a blip on the radar in terms of what they're going through? Because they're still not in a bad place in terms of the table, third in the table, just a point in front of Panama.
No, I think they're going to be fine, ultimately. The runaway narrative, I love that kind of description of how it's going for Mexico and the media and all that good stuff. I do want to touch upon really quick that if there's ever inclement weather or the field is bad, it always feels like there's one team that's always using that. But the other team has to play in the same conditions and on the same crappy field. I don't understand why that's such as big of a narrative as it is. I'm sure there's plenty of Canadian guys that are on the field. Like, I don't want to play on a frozen, turf field, but they use it to their psychological advantage. Very similar to how Azteca, I know it's not easy to play in altitude, and we've, as the U.S. men's national team, we've trained in Denver before to get used to altitude, so we've been prepared for that game. That's just one element of it. And yes, when you play at altitude, that first 10 or 15 minutes, you can't feel your legs. You don't really know where you are. It's crazy. And then when you get past that first win and get into your second, you're fine. But for that first 10 or 15 minutes where it really hits you, I think that should play into it a little bit, but I don't think that's what the story should be about. I really want to get into this Mexican team and why it took them so long to play with urgency. When they go down a goal, they even did it at the end of the United States game. They started to play and maybe a little bit more direct, but even if they were trying to play through midfield and kind of maybe align themselves more with their DNA, which is playing out of every situation, they were doing it with a little bit more purpose. The runs were a little bit harder. They were running with trying to try to make something happen every time they went forward, as opposed to maybe, the pace, the rhythm of it was different. And we saw it against Canada as well. And they almost had that game at 2-2, to Dre's point, and to everybody watching. They were there. So imagine they didn't play that well, and they still had a chance to maybe escape with a point. It's a real fine margin at the highest levels, and they're just on the wrong side of those margins at the moment. They have a ton of home games in this last 6 games. I think 5 of 6 are at home, if I'm not mistaken, or 4 out of 6.
Who's that, Mexico?
Yes, Mexico.
Mexico's got 4 games left at home. They've got the most of anybody in terms of home games left.
So if they can't do the business with 4 out of 6 at home, no matter who they're playing against, they don't deserve to go to a World Cup, in my humble opinion. So if they can just got to tap into that urgency a little bit more, and I think they'll end up seeing more goals from the players that we expect them to score.
Dre, in your balance between Canada and Mexico, because a lot of times we've always talked about U.S. Mexico, and then we talk about the opponent as this thing that should be controlled by the U.S. or Mexico. And when they don't, we talk about the failures of the U.S. and Mexico. I mean, how much of this is Canada and the development of this team and the players and the quality that they have, at least in your perspective? How much of that is the Canada development versus the sort of falling off or the lack of form from Mexico in this one?
Yeah, so I got excited halfway through Jimmy's spiel there, because I thought he would say, I want to talk about Canada, right? Instead of,
I couldn't. I had to pile on Mexico, Dre.
I'm here for it. But I do think the attention ought to be, and obviously it's neither here nor in Mexico is the attention going to be really on Canada, or are they going to be getting the level of coverage and credit that they deserve. But let's be absolutely clear, they deserve all of it, all of the story, all of the headlines based on the performances there and throughout these World Cup qualifiers. We just kicked off the second half of the Ocho, and Canada are deservedly top of the table. Yes, it's a fine margin. It's a 1-point lead over the 2 sort of CONCACAF giants. But I think they're a highly competitive team in a way that I don't remember them ever being. And John Herman obviously gets a ton of credit for that. I think the story here is belief, right? It's the rise and the trajectory of belief for a Canada team that looks like they're convinced that they're going to the World Cup, and mathematically look like they've convinced all of us they're going to the World Cup, and the seemingly lack of belief that we're seeing in Mexico when they don't have that fight for 90 minutes. Usually Tata Martino teams are aggressive. Usually Mexican national teams are really difficult to play against. Neither the US nor Canada really seem to be struggling or having this horrific time. And it felt like Mexico was trying to match the intensity of both of those teams, as opposed to what is the usual story, which is the other way around. The big thing I think for Canada, beyond just the belief, is that they have actual legit weapons to threaten you, right? So they're well coached, they're organized, they're not going to give you a ton of chances, but they've got now a number of guys, not one player that they depend on, but 2-3 players that can create. Tejan Buchanan is emerging as a proper star. Kyle Larin obviously scores 2 goals. We know what he was doing all the way back in his days in Orlando. So they've got more threats, I think, than they've had, at least in my memory.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the difference, right? Is when we looked at teams that have a hope, and I use Panama, for example. They have a belief system. They're well coached, they're well organized, but on paper, you don't go, that's a team, that's a World Cup team when you compare them to the rest, right? Whereas Canada has that belief system and they're buying into that belief, but they also have the quality. We've seen in the past, whether it's Costa Rica, they have 3-4 players that you're like, okay, these are global stars. They can create an impact, but it's going to take more than that. And Canada seems to have a little bit more of that hybrid package. Jimmy, I want to get your take on this, and Dre, follow up on this question as well. How much does that result, Canada beating Mexico, change how we viewed the success of the U.S. getting 4 points in this last window, right? And doing what we say, win your home games, get a point on the road. How much does that change the narrative of that, knowing that this top 4 is now really packed, it's really crowded? Do we need to look back at some of these games and said there should have been more points out there? Or are we still in a good place considering we've got El Salvador home, Honduras home coming up, and Canada away?
I think that hopefully it gives some perspective. That was a word that Dre used a little bit earlier that sticks with me. And we've been talking about it, maybe not as specific as saying the word perspective. But when you see Mexico, who prior to this window were undefeated with 4 wins and 2 draws, they are going to struggle. Canada's going to go through something where all of a sudden it's not working, and they're going to go through their, I mean, they've already got to figure out John Herdman is the coach, and they've got their players, but they're going to struggle. It's just going to be part of it. You can't, I'd be really impressed if they went through 14 games without having a couple moments where they didn't look great. Match day 1, they actually weren't great. They had to get a pretty fortunate penalty to draw with Honduras at home, 1-1. If you remember on that. So
I thought it was a penalty. Well, Honduras were better. We don't have to go back to that. But I do think Honduras were the better team and humbled Canada, who probably looked at themselves on paper before adding that belief and that work that came from the Gold Cup with that makeshift squad as they were losing players to injury.
Right.
But they started to go, okay, it's going to take more than just this on paper or this belief system. We're going to actually have to earn the respect in CONCACAF, which I think they've been doing. Sorry to interrupt your point, Jim.
No, but you make a good point. And what I'd say is that hopefully it gives perspective, and hopefully to the American fan, that this isn't straightforward. This is an A to B that, or like a straight line from A to B that goes up, right? It's going to be down and up and down and up. But you hope that you're still kind of trajectorying up to make that happen. If you can't see me, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. It's a little bit harder to explain audio wise. But I would say that in some ways, maybe lay off the team a little bit. That even Mexico, the great Mexico, and all their top attacking talent, they're having trouble scoring goals. They're having trouble figuring out their offense. I mean, this is a team that came in as the heavy favorites and looked like it to win the whole thing, or at least, be on top of the table at the end of all this World Cup qualifying. And they're struggling right now. And now they want their coach, who we all think and respect as a good coach, they want him out. It's really interesting for me how quickly things can turn. It's a knife's edge in some ways. I do, though, want to go back to Canada, to Dre's point. I am going to talk about Canada here. And I think what they learned in the Gold Cup, to tie 2 of your guys' points together, is that they could rely on some depth. We use the Gold Cup for the same reason. And I think we started to see, we can trust a Miles Robinson to be our guy in the back line. We can trust a Matt Turner. And with Canada, you're like, we can trust, whoever it is, Kyle Larin or well, even though
they continue to change their whole back line. That's what's impressive to me, is they don't even start the same back line every game. They play in a 3 or they play in a 4. They rotate these players, and they're all stepping up, getting, convincing defensive performances.
It's been impressive. And then you add in the fact that they didn't even start Jonathan David last night. Jonathan David leads
because they watched the show, Jimmy. I got Kyle Larin in my CONCACAF 11. They were like, he's got a point there.
You call me Jenny. You call me Jenny or Jimmy. It doesn't matter, yeah. Heath. I know. I agree with you. Jenny and Jimmy both agree with you here. But the fact that they have that type of depth, when we played against Canada back in the day, you really just had to worry about Dwayne De Rosario, and that was really it. Now they had big guys up top, guys that would work hard and do the job, but they're nowhere near as talented as the guys that they have now. And the fact that they could have the luxury of bringing Jonathan David off the bench. The guy has 8 goals in Ligue 1. He's by himself. He's not tied with anybody else. And this is a league that has Mbappe and Neymar and Messi. It's not like they have chumps in Ligue 1. They have some of the top attacking talent in the world. And Jonathan David's name's on the top of that list. And he's not even starting against Mexico is wild to me. And it was the right call. It was the right call. Kyle Larin had a brace. And on top of that, they really attacked the vulnerabilities of Mexico, vulnerable on defensive set pieces. And you can catch them on the counter if you can turn them over when they're trying to play out of stuff. Scoring that goal right before halftime, I think, turned the tide, and then obviously scoring right after halftime sealed the game. But I like the intensity of and the attitude of Canada. I like that they're definitely bought into the project, and obviously now we're seeing the fruits of their labor. It's still a long way to go, but they're a team. I'll just say this: I'll get ahead of it and put my flag in the ground. If I had Canada in my group in the World Cup, I would be bummed because they're going to be very good, and they're a team that I wouldn't want to face.
That's a lot. You're saying a lot, Jimmy. But everybody that's just tuning in, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And don't like that comment from Jimmy. Throw in a comment if you agree with that. You'd be scared of Canada in a World Cup. Dre, what's do you think the narrative is changing in terms of the U.S. success in this window?
Right. So to go back to that question about how does that result affect our perception of the U.S. and U.S. performances, I think one, the math is better, right? Because Mexico having won would have put Mexico a little bit further ahead of the U.S. In terms of the actual table. And I think you don't want to just qualify. It looks like you're going to qualify. You want to actually win CONCACAF. You want to atone for the sins of Russia 2018. And I think this is a team that can do that. But beyond that, I think it does there's something I got a chance to talk to Greg Berhalter before every one of these games that we call, and it just helps to really get that insight of on how they think about these games and how they approach them. And I don't think he would have been all that surprised about what he saw, and I don't think U.S. fans should be that surprised because we're seeing this familiar pattern repeat itself, and that is the U.S. play at home. They look good. They look dominant. The coach gets asked, was this your magnus opus? Was this the best performance that you've had out of your team? And it's been this sort of constant and steady growth that we can see from the U.S. when they play on home soil, when they're feeding off the crowds and the fans and the energy. And it just looks like a completely different team. Away from home, we've got to be honest with ourselves. We've had one good half of football, and it was against Honduras. It was a breakout performance. Honduras is not one of the top teams. It's not a team that looks headed for the World Cup. And so that lack of meeting the moment, meeting the occasion away from home in World Cup qualifying is something we haven't yet seen with any sort of consistency from the United States. And I think that's, yes, you can look at the Mexico results struggling away from home and think, well, it happens to them, it can happen to us. But I think what you need is to be convinced that Honduras wasn't a fluke, that this team can go away from home and make themselves at home and be the protagonist and be the aggressor. And I think there's something interesting about the format that may be playing a part in this, right? Because you were both once upon a time World Cup USA national team veterans. You knew what it was like to go play in difficult places. These young guys, for the most part, didn't before this third round. Like there weren't other rounds for them to go and play against Belize and Haiti and to go through the motions of what it was like to go and play against lesser opposition in difficult environments on crappy pitches. And I think that helps. Obviously, the teams wouldn't be at the same quality of what they're playing against now, but it still helps sort of mentalize how do we match the intensity? What's our pregame prep like? What's our routine like? That's something that they've had to learn in a very small sample size of away games just in this third round of qualifying. And so they couldn't really iron out those kinks before getting here. They seem to be doing that a bit now. I don't think they were played out of the park by Jamaica, for example. But certainly there's a big difference between what you see from the U.S. at home and what they're seeing away. And I think the lack of away experience might be playing a part.
Yeah, let me ask you guys this, and you give me a one-word answer, and everyone that's watching this, I want to know, will Canada finish at the top of the Ocho when it's all said and done?
No.
Jimmy?
I'm bad.
One-word answer, I said. Don't. I'll let you sit there and think, but you don't get to think it out loud. I don't want any explanation. We'll get to an explanation later, but yes or no?
I'll say, you know what? For fun, I'll say yes.
Okay. No, Jimmy, stop. You get one word answer. You get one word answer. And everybody in the comments, let us know if you think Canada finished at the top of the Ocho. If not, I want to know who you think will finish at the top. Just got from the phenomenal. I can't say that. Nope. For the name. Des throwing up some questionable screen names here. Forever knowledgeable. I can say that. Yes, as one. You know, when I look about this, Dre, you know, the narrative was always grind on the road, smash and grab job, fight it out. It's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. I don't remember the U.S., whether I was part of it or not, ever going down and dominating any of these matches. Now, do you think that we need to get to a point where we're not necessarily dominating, but like we played pretty poor against Jamaica. We played pretty poor against El Salvador. We played very poor against Panama. We played very poor in a half against Honduras. At what point do we just at least compete? You know, Canada going down to Mexico. And again, I know Mexico's an outlier because there's always an extra motivation when you play against them. But do you think that there's a level of development that has to happen where it's like, okay, maybe we're not going to play great, but we're going to at least be in the game. You know, we're going to at least have a game plan that Jamaica game didn't look like we had a game plan or a solution to problems that were presenting themselves, whether in real time or in preparation to the game, where we were able to settle back into it, especially when, I'm saying after Mikel Antonio scored, we got punched in the face and we didn't seem to know what to do. Now, it's one thing to be like, we're going to sit in blocks, we're going to withstand pressure, we're going to let them have the ball, we're going to have this game plan that neutralizes our ability to play poorly, and we're going to just be a little bit more kind of, we're going to do 2-3 things really, really well. But it doesn't seem like that. Do you think there's an expectation we should have, or are we going to just continue to always try to go and qualify where ugly away, pretty at home, it's just going to get prettier as the players get better? Or do you think that there's something in there?
So for starters, I'll take, pretty at home, ugly away, if it means 3 points, 1 point, 3 point, 1 point. Like, I'll take that.
But ugly or poorly? That's, I guess, the difference is what I'm getting at. Like ugly away or playing poorly and like hopeful. That game against Jamaica was hopeful. If they finish clear chances, we lose that game.
Yeah, no, they actually 3-1 Jamaica would have been a very fair result,
Yeah.
and we can get into that, into why that would be the case. No, you're right to make the distinction between ugly and poorly. Like, I don't mind ugly. Poorly is a lot more disappointing. I think deflating is the word that I used at the end of it. Right, it was a deflating 1-1 draw, and not for the 2 points dropped, but for the performance itself. I always care more. The thing that I love about this game is I can't think of another team sport where you can outplay the opposition and lose. Soccer is the only sport where that could happen. And so as a result, I care way more about performance. I care way more about the way teams play than whether they pick up 0-1 or 3 points at the end. In the sense that it's more interesting to me to talk about those things, right? And so to put played poorly in sort of in a stats context, that Bobby Reed miss in front of goal was a higher XG value than the entirety of the United States for the 90 minutes. Right. So that's poorly. Like, we played poor. We did not create enough. We didn't.
Which
really
came off of a bad turnover, a missed
Robinson.
clearance. That's basically a drop down to him, which is, again, when we talk about performances, those are the things that you don't get away with at the next level. We got lucky when you give up chances like that.
Credit to Steffen a little bit. He made himself huge and made Bobby Reed panic a little bit, but that's one that you would expect him and almost anybody else to put away. That would have been enough to beat us. The goal that was disallowed was, let's say, soft to be very kind. It's a kind of, yeah, fine, okay, it's a foul maybe, but it's the kind of foul that you see on every single corner kick. And so again, how they played, what to your point about what the game plan was, I loved that at the start of the second half against Mexico, and after scoring the first goal against Mexico, the U.S. had 5 guys up in the final third when Mexico were trying to play out of the back. We basically, put the stake in the ground, as Jimmy said, and told them, you're not getting out of your own half. And they didn't. And in this game, we seemed so much more withdrawn and so much more passive in the middle. Jamaica were very, very comfortable. And so it wasn't a game in which we're going to be able to just absorb and counter against Jamaica. Jamaica have the athleticism, the numbers, the defensive organization to deal with that. And so it was a game where we seemed absolutely lost, where whatever we were trying to do wasn't evident enough for us to then say, okay, well, that was the game plan, which is what I think what you were getting at, Heath.
Yeah. Jimmy, let me ask you this.
Hi.
The narrative of the constructive criticizers on social media have gone from 9 out of 10, Greg Berhalter picks the right lineup for this game. This is exactly what we want to see, to being like, now you see how big of a deal Weston McKennie is when he's not on the field, right? That became the shift. Instead of being like, maybe the lineup is the wrong one, it became, oh, we were missing Weston McKennie. So with your take on this, what you saw, was Weston McKennie the piece that was missing? I think it's a little bit insane in my perspective, which I'll explain in a little bit. But in terms of performances, did we learn anything from this, or did we just get more questions at the end of this window?
Well, I think we learned that our guys are not robots, that they will tire at some point, that they can't necessarily run and track for 90 minutes in maybe a short period of time, which is something to take into consideration, because when we do play Canada in the January January international window, and there's a transfer window too. We're getting ahead of myself here.
You weren't wrong, but you weren't right.
Right. We play them second. We have to go to Canada in our second game. So now we kind of do the same thing we had to do in the first window, which was we play El Salvador first, this time at home. But then we got to kind of rotate the squad so that we have our healthy guys so we're ready to go in Canada, which I think is going to be a tremendous game on January 30th. Yeah. That said,
it'll be on turf and indoor because of the conditions of the seasonal, right? I'm assuming it can't be anywhere else.
I assume they're going to try to do the same thing they did before against Mexico.
But you're talking about it's actually the ground's frozen there.
The frozen tundra. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you can actually play in those types of conditions on grass. So I would think that helps the U.S., but I certainly don't want to play Canada anyway at home.
No, of course. And this is a Canada team that has so much belief in themselves. It's going to be a tall order, but they have their own game in Honduras to worry about first in that window. What I'll say very quickly, though, and I'll kind of reinforce what I said in our recap of the game against Jamaica. The game looked very similar to our first game against El Salvador, where we weren't creating clear-cut chances. We weren't really, finding those combinations. Timo Weah scores a great goal. I love that Ricardo Pepi came into a spot to help combine to make something happen. We didn't see a lot of that, frankly. It happened once, and we struggled to really replicate that type of numerical advantage or that type of movement off the ball or a little playing and moving any 1-2s on a regular basis. And so it looked like maybe some of our guys were trying to do more than the game allowed. And that's where we need to be able to adapt and be like, all right, if this is going to be taken away, where can we exploit what they are giving us? And I don't think we did that very well. In the El Salvador game, I remember we had space out wide, but it was like we were trying to make that perfect pass as opposed to just whip it in sometimes. And if you whip it in with some good timing of the runs, you might get on the end of it. But if we're trying to take that extra touch, then those runs are now dead. And now everything's slowed down. And just feel like we're a little bit off in that regard and didn't necessarily solve it. And for the first time in a long time here in qualifying, we didn't have the right answers at halftime either. We came out of the blocks really well. First 15, 20 minutes, excellent. But we didn't have the answers there. Would Weston McKennie solve it? He might have helped. You know, he does, as we've talked about, has that clutch gene. He likes.
Was it an energy? I don't think
the
people were talking about the energy and the passion, and I don't think the team lacked energy or passion. I just think it was a cohesion thing. It was a game plan thing. It was an execution of that game plan. Whereas Weston McKennie brings you energy. If the energy's low, fantastic. Brendan Aronson brings energy. Matthew Hoppe brings energy. But I don't think we lack that. I think that's the one thing we know we get. It. The fight is there. The energy is there. But the execution of that, I thought, was off.
I always think you get a good idea I always think you get a good idea of how a team is trying to play by who has the most touches, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you look at the game against Mexico, and it was Tyler Adams by a lot. And what does that tell you? That tells you that Adams is pulling the strings. It tells you we're playing in the opposition's half. Typically in a game where someone like a Walker Zimmerman, which was the case here, has the most touches for the U.S., that's a game when you're on the back foot, when you're recycling possession a lot, when you're having to put out fires, play out of the back. There isn't a lot there, so you have to recycle it right back to the center backs. And so at the end of that first half, which the first half was better than the second half for the U.S. against Jamaica, at the end of that first half, the most touches on the team were Walker Zimmerman, who, as I said, not a great sign when it's one of your center backs, and Busio. Busio was the one who was obviously playing in place of Weston McKennie. I liked Busio's performance, but he's a very different player to what McKennie is. He's not a guy who's going to be playing at the edge of the final third. He's more a guy who wants to be a little bit of a regista, who wants to be a little bit deeper and sort of pick out his passes, who's not going to get stuck in quite as much, and isn't going to go into opposition territory to help you win back the ball. I think that tells you a little bit of where this game was played. Against Mexico, we were playing in Mexico's half. We were close to their goal. We're troubling Memo Ochoa. Against Jamaica, we were much further back, had a lot longer area to traverse, and then didn't really have the playmakers in the center of the park, right? Where does we played about 10 to 11 good minutes from the moment that Tim Weah scored the goal until Mikel Antonio's absolute blast when the team was deflated, right? And I think up to that point, we were seeing Tim Weah pop up in a more central area to try and create, which is actually where he got the goal from. Brendan Aronson occasionally doing that, but then that went away. And if you don't have a Weston McKennie there, if Busio is more withdrawn, I guess Musa is the one guy who was sort of doing that, but it was more about keeping possession and really creating key chances. That to me was the big difference between the two games. We didn't have the ball close enough to their 18 at the feet of players who were going to create chances for others.
Yeah. There was, I think it was Julio Campos that had just put a comment up that we should bring in more attackers so that it's not all being put on the Ricardo Pepis of the world. Do you think that we're seeing him settling in differently? Because I think that his performances are still great with the national team. I think he's super efficient. He almost never loses the ball in hold-up play or combination play. He's not wasteful. He gets back into the high spots. I think that we're not doing him a service of getting him into the spots that we need for him to score goals. But in the run of play, he checks back, he checks in, he holds the ball well, he plays quickly, he creates imbalances, and he does a lot of this work that I think people won't measure a striker from ultimately, but I think is still by and large, the best option that we have. I mean, Jimmy, what's your take on Ricardo Pepi? Because I know a lot of people are going to look at it and go, yeah, but we're bringing him on to score goals. And is that on him or what? I guess on a 10 scale, where are you putting Ricardo Pepi right now?
Yeah, I think he's doing well. Ultimately, he's still young, right? And now he's going into some tough spots to go play and get results against teams that are now stacking him up. And let's be honest, if we take Ricardo Pepi in particular, he scored 2 goals against this Jamaica team the last time they played. So why wouldn't they figure out a way to shut him down? I mean, they know they have enough tape. They've seen what they can do. They've seen other teams shut him down. They know how. That's what's going to happen. You're not an unknown quantity anymore. And that's what really separates the good from the great is, okay, when teams still know you, let's take Robert Lewandowski as an example. Can you still create space and have influence? And if you're not scoring goals, what else are you doing? Now, to your point, I do think he's doing a lot of the thankless stuff. He is looking to combine. He is still trying to be influential in and around the box. But if there's no space for him to run into, if there's no space where they can't get a big paw on him and hold him down when he's about to jump or whatever, which is what you're going to get a lot of, especially in CONCACAF, it's going to be difficult. And if we're not whipping in those early balls, and if we if we could replicate what we did against Mexico in the second half, where it was clear that anytime we got in 1v1 situations out wide, we didn't need to beat those players outright, but just create enough of a gap. Steve Ralston-esque, that's a throwback for everybody, who was a master at not being very fast, but getting enough of a space to whip in a good ball. And that's why Taylor Twellman and Pat Noonan scored a bunch of goals, because their timing of those runs and knowing when he was going to do it was so good. And if we can get to that level with our guys, when they recognize that's when the situation is on, and Ricardo Pepi can make those good hard runs, I think he's going to hit the back of the net more often than not. Right now, he's just fighting for a lot of second balls in the box off of crosses or set pieces and hoping to knock something down and get something on frame. There's not a lot going on, but when teams sit back, it's going to be harder for him to find that space. So it's a difficult one. I don't think it's so cut and dry, so black and white that Ricardo Pepi needs to do X so that Y will happen. I think there's a lot of gray there to how to get him have more success. And the more dangerous our attackers are, the more that the center backs will have to pull out to cover for those guys, and that should open up space. But they have to do that consistently for that to happen. And I just think that he's just not an unknown quantity anymore. It's just going to be a little bit harder for him to find it.
Hey, Dre, before you jump in on this, for anybody that's just joining us, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to this channel. Throw those comments in. We'll get them onto the screen. We're enjoying those. And here's a question for all of you, not necessarily you two on the show, but anybody that's watching this. If not Ricardo Pepi, then who would you have at the number 9? Now, Dre, I think one of the issues, and as I was explaining it before, it came to mind, is predictability. Jimmy talked about, Timo Weah is good because after the first 2 times he did it, you knew I'm going to take 2 touches, and as soon as I have my gap, I'm whipping this ball in hard and fast. And we saw that theme happen throughout the game where the team started to be able to understand. Christian Pulisic was able to make better runs and things like that. How much of the team's game plan do you think is about becoming more predictable for your own teammates as a team in terms of how we hold up play, how we attack, how we press as a unit? Because again, I don't think energy is the issue with this team. Maybe there was moments that we didn't pick and choose our energy right against Jamaica, but it's more of like the timing and the predictability of when we press, when we drop, when we move, kind of who's checking in, who's making the runs, all that fluidity that happens in a game. I think when the team is off, that happens for like 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then we start to look really, really nervous and bad and sort of confused as where the solutions to problems are.
Right. So personnel-wise, it was only 2 changes, right, between the Mexico game and this one. Mm-hmm. And so if we were seeing these kinds of performances at home, then I would think, these guys are all young. They still need the time to play from memory to really acclimate. But the difference in these results, not in the results, the difference in these performances suggests to me that it's more the mental side of it, right? Because sometimes this is something I was talking with Maurice Adu, my commentary partner, and your good friend.
There's your humble brag for the day. You only get one of those, Dre. You only get one. You get to hang out with Mo Adu. Jimmy hasn't used his yet, but we'll get there.
So we were chatting about that afterwards, and the lack of a crowd even away from home is not really a plus, right? Like, yes, a very big, they said it was going to be 5,000 fans. There were clearly not 5,000 fans at the office in Kingston. But even if that stadium is packed, yes, that helps Jamaica because they have a crowd that they can feed off of. But I think of a line that Dwayne Wade used to say when he was playing for the Miami Heat is that when I'm on the road, they boo for me. Right? You guys were both players. You know that you can actually turn that around and take that hostility and use it as a motivating factor. And so what these guys have, whether it was in El Salvador, whether it was in Honduras, now with Jamaica, they aren't great crowds. And so you're away from home. You're not getting the buzz of the home crowd. You're not really getting vilified by the away crowd. And so I do think it's more of the mental thing than the familiarity thing with this team in terms of figuring out how to motivate themselves, what the routines are like, how to maintain the, if not energy, then let's use intensity in those games.
Yeah. So Jimmy, do you think suffering efficiently is something that exists? Can you suffer efficiently? Because it seems like you suffer inefficiently.
Look, talk about Diego Simeone. That guy is a master at making sure his teams suffer efficiently. Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I guess the takeaway is, and I found a cool stat here, was that the U.S. has 5 points from 4 road games in this round. In the entire hex of 2018, the U.S. had 3 points from 5 road games. So it's not.
But what
all
about the one
doom and gloom.
before that? What about the like 18?
I'm just saying.
Like
I'm
it
just
sucked.
saying.
But what about 14? Is that on there as well or no?
No, I don't have 14.
Maybe our producer Des will see what the 14 road points
are.
But
yes, in terms of suffering, you have to do that, and that's why I thought replicating the lineup or having it as close as possible to Mexico is good. That consistency is good. We need that, so that these guys can suffer together. And we still got a result. Yeah, it wasn't great, but we got a result. And I don't know if we could have said that about this team a year and a half, 2 years ago. and this core, but now they're starting to age. They're starting to get more mature. They're evolving. Their sophistication and knowing of each other is just going to continue to get stronger, and their bonds are going to get stronger. What I'll say very quickly, when I think about the tactics that maybe we could have done in the second half, because it didn't seem like Jamaica were too bothered by our subs or anything that we did at halftime or whatever, anything we talked about, maybe it was time to throw in a second striker, to throw them off a little bit. So maybe one stays higher to occupy the two center backs, and then we have somebody else a little bit more central that's picking up those second balls. And that gives us a different look, which really lends itself to why we didn't bring in a second number 9 into camp. We have guys that can play that. More of as a false 9. Jesus Ferreira can play
he plays
there.
with Ricardo Pepi, so how could he be a 9?
That's true. He can't. But I'm just saying he could if they wanted to replicate it, but more of a false 9. He would drop in. But Daryl DK has scored 6 goals in his last 7 games in MLS. He's red hot for Orlando City. He's obviously proven himself that he can hang with some of the top defenders in the world and have success. He would have been an interesting choice. Jordan Pifok, another guy that I think could deal with some of the physicality that Jamaica was definitely coming with and trying to set the tone early with their tackles. Josh Sargent maybe wasn't the right guy per se, but Pifok and maybe even Matthew Hoppe would have been interesting to see if we just could have had that second striker option if we wanted to use it. And maybe with 30 minutes left to go, instead of maybe flopping wingers for wingers, we actually brought in a second striker that could have given us a different look. And I don't know, maybe we play with a little bit more urgency like Mexico did at the end, where you start to get a little bit more direct, try to win the second balls and play from there. I felt like we just tried to continue to go with the same stuff, and it wasn't really working. So I don't know. That's me kind of going off on a tangent and going backwards. But I don't know. We're fine. We're going to be fine.
Yeah. We're going to be fine. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break. If you're watching this on YouTube, stay right with us. We're not going anywhere. If you're listening to this on audio, we'll be right back. All right, we are back, everyone. Dre, thanks for sticking around. We know that you're a busy man. You got a lot to do, but I'm enjoying this conversation. And I want to talk about what will Greg Berhalter's roster look like moving forward, right? And I guess right off the top, in terms of lineups or where the power rankings are in our goalkeeper position, Dre, where do you stand in terms of the Steffen Turner type of thing? And do you think the goal from Mikel Antonio affects that standing? Do you think the way in which we played on the road against a Jamaica was very different than where you get the strength from Steffen? He didn't get called upon to relieve us of pressure and hold the ball much. We seemed in much more of a panic, which I think plays into a little bit more into Turner's style of play of just being more direct and safe. I mean, which goalkeeper are you going with at this moment?
That's interesting. We're gonna do like an old Carlo Ancelotti, Iker Casillas versus Keylor Navas. Like we'll have one play the home games, one play the away games.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say the corny. It's not a terrible idea. I'm here for it. Like
Bob Bradley does first half substitutes in Major League Soccer every weekend now. The game is changing, man. You got to evolve.
Right. If you're not going to be as aggressive as proactive, then maybe Turner away from home makes some sense. I think Zach Steffen is the number one. I love what he does. If you ask Greg about him, he thinks that despite not playing as often, obviously, as Turner does, the fact that he trains with someone who many consider to be the best goalkeeper on the planet, definitely one of the guys that's in the conversation at Manchester City, helps.
Yeah, but you got the best hitting coach in tennis. You're going to win tennis tournaments? Let's go, man. Like, what do you mean? You get by proxy, he's going to be great for us? We need minutes.
Did you see Steffen in the first half against Mexico? Did it look like he needed minutes to keep us in that game?
No, that slot through to Yunus Musa through 3 guys, man. I was like Steffen for life, but then I look at the goal that maybe could have saved, maybe he couldn't, but he definitely looked frozen.
So we have Brianna on set, and she said that he got caught a little bit flat-footed. I'm an optimist, man. I'm going to give all the credit in the world to Mikel Antonio, and I'm going to say that Turner would have been beaten by that goal as well. And let's be honest, that's the one big moment that the goalkeeper could have potentially done anything about, right? Because the others were a goal that got called back that would have been, I think, a legit goal. And I think there was a couple of opportunities, one against Mikel Antonio, and then the miss from De Cordova-Reid, where Steffen made them panic a little bit, closed them down, sprinted off his line to get there. I don't know if Turner does that necessarily. I don't know if he's that type of goalkeeper, if he'll stay more on his line to try and react and save it. But I think it's a win-win. If Turner starts, I'm happy. If Steffen starts, I'm happy. I just think that in Greg Berhalter's mind, Zach Steffen, who was the starter before being injured in the Nations League, and Turner, Horvath going absolutely nuts, coming off the bench to make that huge save at the end. Steffen was the starter then, and I think his performance against Mexico shows you that he probably is more than qualified to be the starter now. So I don't think that's that big of an issue. What I would say, though, is that looking ahead to January, when you get Pulisic in a position where he can play for 90 minutes, you're getting Gio Reyna back, you think these minutes in these matches that the likes of Tim Weah and Aronson are getting and impressing in are going to be invaluable, because then you have much more versatility to how you manage your minutes. You have much more of a threat coming off of the bench, and I think you have an overall better squad then.
Yeah, Jimmy, and for everybody that's watching this, are you Zach Steffen, or are you team Matt Turner at the moment? I'm not saying just off of the one goal, because it's such an arbitrary. He did look flat-footed, but it was a banger, and it's not like he made a mistake through his legs or like had some sort of glaring error. I think that was more on the team than anything. One, not having pressure on it, but also two, not creating much in that entire game.
That's a wonderful problem to have. I'll go with Zach Steffen right now. I think that because of his passing ability, it gives us a different look from that position, that we can thread a needle, that he can, hit a nice little long ball 30 yards on somebody's chest, in a good position that leads that player into space. Those little things do end up mattering, and I think that will probably be why he's the number one. That said, I think we've gotten ourselves into a position where if Zach's not available, he's hurt or whatever, we're all really confident in Matt Turner to go out there and do the job and make some world-class saves. So I am happy about that. I think Zach's the number one for now, but very, very satisfied with not even a number two. It's like a 1B, frankly.
Yeah. Jimmy, going into the January window and Arriola season done, Sebastian Lletget season done, Ricardo Pepi season done, Jesus Ferreira season done. You had the January camps, Jimmy, as a player. You knew what it was like in the offseason. I think that you were probably the higher 1% of in terms of the way athletes took care of themselves in the offseason. You prided yourself in that. Others don't. In terms thanks
for doing my flex.
I just can't. I can't have you just talking about that Mexico goal today. We're too far removed from the game, and then obviously the goal that you scored against Mexico. But when I think about that, and we think about putting together that team for the end of January, do you think that the MLSers have a little bit of a tougher go, considering they're you're talking about now that they don't have a game, and they'll have the December game, Bosnia and Herzegovina, but like from there's really nothing else happening until the end of January. And maybe there's a January camp that gets them a couple prep games, but I mean, does that affect the players you put in the team? We know with goalkeepers, it's a little bit different, but for field players, I mean, it's a big deal.
No, it's a big deal. And I do think it should be part of the narrative with regard to the season schedule that MLS has and how it does hurt the players in this particular moment. I find the December game quite interesting. I don't remember us ever playing in December ever. I can't even remember a time we had a game in December, but maybe that's prepping us for hope that we're going to be in December in the World Cup. That would be a nice omen. But yes, to your point, I think that those guys that are definitely in the pool, Ricardo Pepi in particular, I could see him also going to go on loan potentially in January if they can get him somewhere for 4 to 6 weeks. I think they'll have a lot of interest to maybe going to just train with somebody with practicing for a little while.
Bayern.
We've seen it with Eddie Johnson. Eddie Johnson with Manchester United. I remember him coming back to a January camp after he did couple weeks with Luis Saha and those guys at Man United. I have never seen a better version of Eddie Johnson. The guy was fantastic. I couldn't defend him. So hopefully there's an opportunity like that. I'm sure. I don't know why everybody would be looking to make that happen, even FC Dallas, for a training opportunity for him to go over there and get a look. With this game in December, I feel like there's just going to kind of be this constant camp. You're going to probably roll a couple weeks into that game, all the MLS guys that are available. Then you're going to take the holidays off, and then you're going to ramp back up again at the beginning of January. We're in a World Cup year. We're very close to it. There's no more dicking around, and there's no more leaving things to chance or letting guys have a little bit of a break. This is the real deal. It's time to get serious. And I remember that camp before the World Cup that I was in. I was still on the bubble at that point, 6 months out, and that camp was flying. I mean, if you want a really good level at a camp, go to the camp that's the last one, January camp that is.
That was 6 weeks. Cup. I remember that one. I was in that one.
It was fast.
Learned a lot that one in that camp. Dre, let me ask you this. Do you have most of your starting 11 figured out? All things equal, everyone healthy? We're talking about Gio Reyna being back in the team. We're talking about other players playing regularly at their club teams in a perfect world. Are you close to what your 11 would look like? And I guess what would be the tough changes that you would have to make from the current group we have now compared to when we're fully healthy and fit, which I don't know if we'll ever be because that's the nature of the game. But I just want to get your perspective on that.
So you probably have three, right? I think your goalkeeper, we answered that question, at least in terms of our opinion. It looks like your fullbacks, your best options, you're looking at your best 11 are Serginho Dest on the right, Anthony Robinson on the left. DeAndre Yedlin played really, really well against Mexico in particular to keep himself in the conversation, especially if you need more of a defensive mindset for a game than possibly.
Whoa, did you say DeAndre Yedlin defensive mindset?
Well, as opposed to Serginho Dest, right?
Okay, yeah. In context, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Right. So this is what I love about this. Nobody gets away with anything. Like, you need to actually back up what you're talking about. So this is why we tune in. I think in the midfield, you've sorted out your best midfield trio, and it's my favorite part of this team right now. It's McKinney, Adams, and Musa, which, by the way, I love watching Musa play.
Ooh, amen to that.
He's a big dude. He looks solid, but somehow he's just gliding all over the pitch. There's no wasted movement. He's my favorite type of central midfielder, and I'm just mesmerized by him. If I wasn't calling the game, I'd just be fixated on watching Musa play for the entirety of the 90 minutes. Although he got taken off after 66, much to my chagrin. And in attack, I think you're looking at Pepi probably has that pole position to be the number 9, because I love that you pointed out his hold-up play, which I thought was terrific against Mexico, good against Jamaica, although he didn't have as many touches. And he had probably just 2 opportunities, one against Mexico, one against Jamaica. He'd like to have those back. There are chances that he probably puts away. But again, I think our total XG for that game was 0.6. So it wasn't even one whole goal worth of expected goals. And no question that Gio Reyna and Christian Pulisic would be in your starting 11, right? So that basically is your 11. I think the only place where you have a question where it's a 1A, 1B situation is, where is John Anthony Brooks when the January window comes around? Is he playing at a level where you feel comfortable starting him? Or is it the guys that you're rolling with now in Miles Robinson when he's available and Walker Zimmerman?
Jimmy, what's your take? Because I think Walker Zimmerman's my number 1 at the center back position, only because when I go back to what I said earlier about predictability, he's one of the few players. He's not going to play. He doesn't have a range of pass. He's just a little more traditional of a center back. But at least you see this consistent effort, fight, winning aerial duels, on the ground challenges, kind of recovery runs. He just seems to understand the position so well that I do think the players around him can then have a little bit more balanced of a role or predictability for where they need to be and where they need to make plays. But anyways, we got Kaylani talking about Scally is the USA's best right back, Jimmy. So, I mean, in terms of your best 11 right now, I mean, I would love to hear it. And does it differ from Dre's?
Well, maybe. I was thinking about 50 different things when Dre was mentioning his team. So Dest is the interesting one for me because he is having a lot of success as a winger for Barcelona right now. So I'm very curious to see how Xavi sets him up now that he takes over. And now, obviously, with the re-emergence of Dani Alves back in the team, which I don't think will kick in until January anyway, but still having his influence. I wonder how that's going to help Dest from an outside back perspective or for a winger. So I'm curious about Dest because if we now start to see him and Scally can emerge and Yedlin can be a little bit more consistent at the right back perspective. I thought Yedlin was good these last 2 games. Then maybe we see Dest as a different option. And then all of a sudden we get really crowded in the winger spot because Aronson has emerged. Timo Weah obviously had 3 very good games, last 3 games for us. When Reyna gets healthy, Poole is sick. There's just a lot of options in this particular area. My midfield's for sure set. Adams, McKinney, Musa, that's easy. Anthony Robinson. I'd go with Zimmerman as well for all the reasons. I was actually talking to somebody about how I loved playing with Eddie Pope when I played for the national team. And they're like, well, that's because you're the talker. And Eddie doesn't say that much. And I think Walker is a talker as well, and I know that rhymes, so don't roll your eyes, but he is very good at the intangibles, holding a pretty good line, being very good in terms of communication, putting guys in good spots. Ultimately, as Richard Goff, the famous Scottish defender, once told me when I asked him for advice when I first showed up as an MLS rookie with San Jose, I'm like, what do you got for me? Like, what can I learn? He's like, just put fires out before they start. And I was like, that's it? That's your okay. But then he was so right. It was the simple way to answer that.
Yeah, shift a player a half step this way, cut off that lane.
And it does your job. Yeah. It does your job for you, and it makes everything much more predictable. And I think Walker's very good at that. Now, Miles, I think has been awesome. So he would start.
I don't think he was great this last camp, to be honest with you.
He wasn't great, but
I don't think he finished the who did we play in the end of the last window?
Costa Rica.
Yeah, I think
right. He gave up
those
the
last
chance.
3 games, he just seemed a little bit off to the standard that we had seen from him at that point, but
Sure.
not poor by any means.
Maybe I feel like every game we had seen up until that point, he was taking steps up, and now he's leveled off a little bit. So now we have to wait to see if he can continue to take those next steps. Yes, he didn't maybe gain as much, but I still feel like he's steady back there, and everybody kind of knows how he plays, and it's easy to build off of that. I don't know if I want Dest at right back. That's the big question mark for me. Maybe as a winger, but Yedlin I thought was solid. I want to see Scally at some point. Hopefully we'll get that opportunity to do that. And then up top, I agree with Pepi. Steffen's in goal for sure. Pepi, Pulisic if he's healthy, and then I think you go with Reyna when he's healthy as well. But you know that you can trust Awea. You know you could probably throw Dest up there. It's interesting, but we've got some talent, man. It's a good time to be an American fan for sure.
The thing that I'm trying to think through is just how different Brendan Aronson is from Timo Weah from Gio Reyna. And how your team has to set up differently, right? Can Timo Weah play on the same side as Dest? Can Gio Reyna play on the same side as Dest? I don't know. Gio Reyna is great when he's connected to the number 9, right? We see that at Dortmund. When he's not connected, he's not going to play well out on the touchlines. He needs combination play in and out of spaces. Does there need to be a hybrid type of situation where Gio Reyna is at his best? Because I've yet to see him at his best consistently. Other than Nations League, I thought he was really good. But like where he has the impact that he has at the club level, where he's constantly connected, super dangerous on the attack, in transition, all these things. Do we need to have a hybrid role in terms of where you place him on the field? Because we also suffer from this idea of like, okay, we've got MMA, right? We've got our central midfield figured out. And Dre, I'm curious of your thoughts on this. We got MMA figured out, but it takes us a long time in games before we connect that MMA to the front line and how we start to have more numbers in the box and better attack cohesion. They're so good together, but how do we now make the attacking 3 and the midfield 3 be a defensive 5 and an attacking 5 and those types of things where they're connected? Does that require us to change at least the system of play a little bit when Gio Reyna's back?
Yeah, it's a great question because you almost have to hit the reset button, right? And a lot of the stuff that you've learned, a lot of the things that you've done well, maybe won't apply quite as much when you have both Pulisic and Reyna healthy, because the concern going into Nations League and even during Nations League, which we haven't seen Reyna and Pulisic play much since then, was that the team gets too narrow because those guys don't trust that if they stay out wide, that if they're tucked in toward the touch lines, that the ball is going to come to them. So they both tend to come into central areas. That sort of gets crowded, and then we lack width in attack unless you get it from your fullbacks. And so that's sort of a puzzle that's been sort of in suspense, waiting for these two guys to return to be able to play with this 3-man midfield. Remember, Musa was called in but did not play at all in those 2 matches against Honduras and Mexico in the summer. And, thankfully he sort of was patient, bided his time and eventually came into the team. And so I'd love to see what that dynamic is like, but clearly Pulisic and Reyna are not, wingers like Aronson and Timo Weah that are going to be super comfortable just staying out wide and waiting for the ball to come to them. They're going to be wanting more touches. How does that change the shape of the team? That's sort of to be determined. I think, by the way, it's not necessarily a negative. It's just a thing that has to be sorted out.
Well said. We're getting screamed at by our producer right now to make sure that we talk about how good Panama have been in this qualifying. He's not even Panamanian, but they do deserve the respect. We talked earlier about that hope and belief, and it feels like Panama have that more than anyone. Jimmy, you had Thomas Christensen as your manager. I assume that still stays and sticks, but they've kind of got this never say die attitude where they get into tough spaces and get them out. Is there one thing, and I'll start with you, Jimmy, about Panama that you think is either a strength to the other teams in trying to qualify in terms of a weakness in Panama, or is there something that you like about them that make them potentially a wild card to the final date?
Oh, it's 1,000% a wild card with Panama, and it's tough to not go with John Herdman at this point as the manager, and we're going to get into our best 11 in CONCACAF here in a second. But Thomas Christensen, I think, has overachieved with this current Panamanian team. I think he's done a good job of getting a lot. They have talent, don't get me wrong, but getting a lot out of a team that didn't have maybe a lot on paper, let's say, and getting them to buy into a collective, which I think what we're seeing with Canada as well. I feel like when you look at the U.S. and Mexico, maybe the expectations and the pressure are too high for those particular countries, but we seem to, maybe because of our depth as well, right? We don't have the luxury of rolling out the same 11 guys because those are our best 11 guys. We have so many other options. We're always tinkering. And when I look at Canada, they're not really tinkering too much outside of the back line. Everything else is pretty set, and as is their ideology and how they want to move. Panama, for me, feels very similar, maybe even more so, because they got their 12, 13, 14 guys, and that's that. And they're either going to qualify for the World Cup or they're not. And they're really buying in. And I think they really benefited from having a 2-game window here instead of a 3 because they didn't have to rotate as much. That said, there's something about them scoring 3 goals in 5 or 6 minutes when they're down 2-0 in Honduras that speaks to their character. And then obviously being down to El Salvador a minute into the game at home, a game they needed to win to stay, really create some distance between them and everybody else that's right behind them for that 4th spot. And now everything's up for grabs. I mean, when you look at the table, it is wild. 16 points for Canada, 15 for the U.S., Mexico 14, Panama 14. I don't think we're near the end of this story for Panama, but I think they put themselves in a nice spot to make something happen. And I want to give a shout out to their outside back, Davis, who ended up scoring the winner against Honduras, just pushing forward and kind of buying into, like, let's just go for it. I feel like they're the ones that are playing with house money. They got nothing to lose.
Yeah, big respect, Jimmy, for giving love to outside backs. You know, I have nothing but time and love for that. Dre, looking at this schedule for Panama through the rest of their qualification campaign, I mean, does this look favorable to you? Does it look difficult compared to the way the U.S. has to sort of see this out? I know that, you know, kind of, I'm trying to, I guess, compare schedules from here on out, home versus away. We know the difficulties. Everybody suffers from home and away in CONCACAF. It's not just the U.S. I mean, does this look like a decent path to a World Cup for them?
So I think Jimmy's point about their not being able to rotate all that much is a good one. And it's probably the reason why for Panama, no matter what's left on its schedule, it's going to feel a lot tougher than it does for the U.S., for Mexico, or for Canada right now. Remember the first window, they used the same exact 11 for 3 straight games, right? And the team seemed to tire a little bit, change things a little bit during the second window, but not by that much because they just clearly did not have that many options to make sort of wholesale changes. So I don't expect any of this to be easy for Panama, just as none of it has been easy for them to stay in this race right now. There's a very clear delineation between the 4 teams that look like they're headed for the top 4 spots. Panama look like probably the favorite for the Intercontinental playoff spot, but it's so tight between those 4 teams that really, you know, I wouldn't be stunned if it's Canada, right? Canada could finish first or they could finish 4th. Mexico could finish first or they could finish 4th. So I don't see anything easy for Panama the rest of this way. What I do see is a team that, as Jimmy was saying, really knows how to fight because it was 3 goals in 9 minutes at the end of the game where it didn't look great. In this case, they give up a goal in the opening minute against El Salvador and fight back with a really strong early second half performance and get all 3 points out of that. But it's not so convincing that you think, yeah, no, they're going to have easy games home or away. And so if one of these 3 teams is going to fall back a little bit from the pack, you would say Panama is the most likely to.
Yeah, and by the way, one of the one game we were missing up on that screen was they finished their World Cup qualifying at home against Canada. So they play the U.S. Away from home, and then they play Canada at home. So there's certainly a difficult.
I'm just going to jump in and say really quick, their first game in that January transfer window, I did it again.
You got it. You're not right, but you're not wrong, Jimmy. It's fine.
Okay, it's true. It just rolls. January transfer window, not international one. But their first game is at home against Costa Rica. That's it. They win that game. That puts them on 17 points, and it puts Costa Rica on 9. That's their closest competitor to try to catch them for that 4th spot. I'm sure they're probably going to draw at this point, but if they can win that game, I think that would ultimately set them apart. So that one is the one to watch for sure. That's my favorite match, actually, that first match day of the next window.
Yeah. Okay. So let's shift over to our CONCACAF 11s, Dre. I'm not sure if you were even supposed to be, anything to do with this. So we'd love it if you just critique ours or throw in any thoughts that you would have differently than that. Maybe we start with Jimmy's, Des, just so he can attack Jimmy's 11 and then maybe be a little bit softer on mine. But we wanted to kind of go through this window, and obviously we're going to shift back to, we do this weekly show, the USMNT hour every Monday, where we can talk about these CONCACAF 11s. But right now, coming out of this break, Jimmy and I kind of came into this with very different teams than I feel we have now. Some players stayed, but for the most part, we weren't giving as much respect, or we tried to find respect for other players. So this is Jimmy. Jimmy, walk us through your
Keylor Navas, let's just say it, the best goalkeeper potentially in CONCACAF history. When he plays, Costa Rica plays different. They always have a chance to win when he's between the sticks. When he doesn't play, they give up soft goals like they did against Canada. But when he does play, he just, his mere presence makes a difference, and they end up beating Honduras at home.
So we're not talking about form right now, Jimmy. We're just talking about 11 then. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I'd say Eric Davis, I thought, has been very good for Panama. I want to give some love. We had Bart Sanis last time in our teams. I think collectively because he's pulling the strings for that. But I think Eric Davis has been influential. He scored the winner against Honduras to cap that epic comeback. I like Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman. I know that Miles probably isn't in your team because you're a little down on him this window, but I just like that partnership there. I have actually put one of your players that was in last time in my team, Alistair Johnston.
Yeah,
I thought he was
welcome.
excellent. You're welcome. Thank you for bringing him to my attention in a more meaningful way. He's the one, the catalyst. He ended up stealing the ball that led to the first goal against Mexico. Memo Ochoa's got to look in the mirror and probably do better with that rebound. But I love his spirit, and I think he really kind of encapsulates what Canada is all about. Just good, hardworking guys that are making the most of their opportunity. Tyler Adams, I think arguably one of the best players in qualifying right now for the country and for the whole CONCACAF qualifying. Stuckiao, I like him a lot because he's taking all the set pieces. I don't think he's getting a lot of credit, and I wanted to give him some love. I think he's pulling the strings and getting the ball in good spots for those.
He started scrapping a lot more too, like getting into real scraps than just sort of being a little more of like quality on the ball. You're seeing a little bit more of that fight as Atiba Hutchinson starts to age.
Yeah, well, I didn't know he did age. Atiba Hutchinson's been playing. I played against Atiba Hutchinson. And then Alphonso Davies is the number 10. Okay, whatever. You can roll your eyes. The guy can play any position. That I just wanted to put him down a little bit.
He played up top. That's a fair position to put him in the attack now. Yeah, like, it's not like you don't have to waste a fullback spot for Alphonso Davies.
That's true. Kyle Larin, obviously coming off 2 goals, 2 important goals for Canada against Mexico. Mikel Antonio, 2 goals and 3 caps, scoring thunderbolts or scoring world-class goals against El Salvador. I thought Timo Weah has been excellent the last 3 games in particular. So that's who I'm going with. Dre, go ahead and judge me. What do you think?
I'm in a blind rage at the contortions that you had to do here to keep Yunus Musa out of your CONCACAF top 11. Like,
thank you. Jeez Louise. Now we got some real logic coming into the conversation.
I'm trying to balance it out.
Jimmy helping his friends out with this list.
You went out of your way. You went out of your way to keep my boy out of this. And I honestly, I thought he was the most impressive midfielder of the 3. Like Tyler Adams, we know what he's going to give you. And he's absolutely brilliant and deserves to be on this list. And I'm all for giving players love and respect, but not at the expense of I think he's become an absolutely key piece.
Sit down, little boy.
Sorry, Musa. I apologize.
Outside of that, I tend to agree with a lot of this. I do like Walker Zimmerman especially being in there because I don't remember him losing a duel during these 2 matches. Like they said that he could start in a spaghetti western, right? Just like going around winning duels left and right, putting out fires before they start, as you were saying. And not just the aerial duels, right? It's not just, when he's challenged in the air. It's also the way that he knows exactly when to step up to make things uncomfortable for attacking players. And he does stop a lot of the 3v2s before they really materialize into something dangerous. So I love his spot there. By the way, with Peter Navas, you could have just removed the probably or potentially. He's the greatest goalkeeper in CONCACAF history.
Okay, that's fair.
He's the only one that's not based on current form.
I'm still friends with Casey Keller and Tim Howard. I'm just trying to
fair.
I'm just trying to be respectful. But yeah, that's why I gave it the probably. But it's hard to argue otherwise. Okay, let's see yours, Heath. Enough of my stuff. I bet you it's a con.
I got Dre. I got Dre on my side on this one because look, of course not. I thought Tyler Adams had one. Like again, energy aside, I thought he continues to have some vulnerable turnovers that I think are pivotal moments in games that can hurt the U.S. Obviously, didn't against Mexico, but could have. And it doesn't have the same. I know he had the most touches against Mexico. I respect that. In the Jamaica game, I just look at the team and I think who's the one that's pulling the strings for me? Who's the one that wants it when things get really bad and when this team starts to fall apart? The only one that doesn't disappear to me in the buildup or in tough times is Yunus Musa.
Adams.
And he deserves to be, because he wants the ball everywhere. You see him, like he draws in 2 guys and then you go, oh man, normally in this situation, we play it backwards and we dump it long and he just goes, no, I'm going to just shimmy this way and drive the ball up the field and kind of solves a lot of problems. So Yunus Musa makes my team. Walker Zimmerman, same thing. There's just something about the old school way of being a center back that makes everything he does. I just really enjoy his commitment. And also when I look at there's a maturity to his game that I don't think we have from our other center backs outside of maybe John Anthony Brooks, but I haven't seen that in the national team in a little bit. But there's a maturity to his game that he's been in reps and he's been in situations enough times that he knows how to solve the problems, whether he's pulled wide, whether he's in a challenge or a numerical disadvantage. He just seems to make the right decision more often than not, and I like him there. Danilo Henry was just a monster ready to start a fight and get a yellow card or potentially red from the very start against Mexico. I just really like him. Jimmy, you had him in your team.
I know.
Last time around, you took him out.
I did. I should have kept him in because I thought he was good against Mexico as well.
Alistair Johnson, again, a versatility player, but he had that driving down the field shot that led to the first goal, and I just think to have that kind of activity for a team that's probably the most informing CONCACAF right now. I think it's great. Kyle Aaron up top. He was in my team last time. I was heavily criticized because I put him over Jonathan David. Obviously, I shouldn't, because Kyle Aaron's the king of CONCACAF in 2021. I think he has the most goals by a large margin because of all the games that they've scored. Mikel Antonio proven himself. And then Timothy Weah, I think credit where credit's due. He's just a guy, again, that is clearly kind of rounding into form, and that's the kind of form you want to continue to see. So Greg Berhalter's decision-making becomes even harder. And also, as I was saying before, brings a different type of element to the game, where if we are in these types of moments, route one, take 2-3 touches, whip the ball in the box, and just brings a different type of game, so that when we approach teams, you can look at it from a different of like, who's our best 11, but who's the right 11 against this opponent that we're playing. So go ahead, Dre. Spray holes in this.
No, you know what? Before we get to Dre, I got to hop in and say, no Tyler Adams. No Tyler Adams.
Jimmy, I gave you Eric Davis. You liked him. I put Doniel Henry, who you had in your last one. I gave you Kyle. I'm giving you Kyle Laren, who, like, the guy who did the fish out of water celebration and all that. Was what a day that was.
No Tyler Adams. Listen, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm out. I can't deal with this anymore.
Dre.
Yeah,
we lost Jimmy. Jimmy had to run, so we'll wrap this up without him. But Dre, what's your take on this one?
So Weston McKennie only played one of the two games, right? So it's a little bit tough for me to justify putting him on the best 11 for the qualifying window, because he didn't feature at all against Jamaica. But I do think he is one of the best central midfielders, obviously, in the region. So I'm not going to be mad about him not being there. I'm not as hard on Tyler Adams as you are. I think obviously he was better against Mexico, where he led the team in touches, than he was against Jamaica, where you're right that he did have a couple of giveaways that turned into counterattacks for the Jamaicans. Outside of that, I'll make one final comment on my Yunus Musa appreciation hour, because I feel like that's how I started. So that's how I'm going to close. It's so rare to find a midfielder who is simultaneously that strong and that slippery, right? Because he's just as able to just have defenders sort of ricochet off of him as he is to slither by 2 or 3 running into to advance the ball, to advance possession with the ball at his feet. Outside of that, I don't have a lot of critiques here. Mikel Antonio looks like the most threatening number 9 currently, just on form right now in the region. And that goal that he scored from 34 yards out was absolutely scary. I think Zach Steffen probably got robbed on this, though, because neither of you had him on there, and you admit that Navas is not there on form. Steffen was good enough, I think, on the balance of the 2 games to make it.
It's probably the cheapest placement that we had of any player. We talked about it quite a bit and at length previously, because it should go to an in-form goalkeeper, right? And I think Zach Steffen is in form. And then you start to go there and you go, okay, well, if I'm looking at World Cup qualifying right now and I look at this best 11, where's the balance, right? There are some players, and obviously I don't think Keylor Navas should be the answer, to that problem as well. But I look at, like, okay, Panama, they're playing really well, but they're giving up a bunch of goals and they're just having to come back and score more goals, right? And I look at Honduras, El Salvador, I'm sort of like, where is the other goalkeeper in here? I thought about Matt Turner and I thought about Zach Steffen, and I think that's a fair assessment that Zach Steffen probably got hard done by both of us just because of Keylor Navas' status. We don't have another Costa Rican in this team. We don't have anybody else from any of the other. I mean, we're talking about Eric Davis, which I think is respectful enough, but we're not giving this is the hard part about the 11 is you got to go like, well, if I take him out, I got to put him in. And so we went the cheap route of including the rest of CONCACAF and a goalkeeper that's not even playing right now. Yeah. But yeah, any final thoughts, Dre? And we appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, no, that this is a lot of fun, that it feels like 5 minutes as opposed to an hour and 5 minutes that we've been chatting now. So appreciate the invite. Like I said at the start of this, you guys are absolutely crushing it. And I think when we see the U.S. Next window, the same question going into this window will be the question going into that. We know they're going to be good at home. We know they're going to continue to grow and show development. Can they translate that to, not better results, because I think a point away against Jamaica is a good result, but better performances are needed outside of the U.S.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate the time, Dre. And as a reminder, everyone, Qué Golazo Pod continues. We've got the weekend preview coming up later on in the week. We've got the weekend recap live on Sunday afternoon. So make sure you don't miss that. Turn that subscribe button on so that you make sure you get everything. And make sure you go follow us on social at Qué Golazo Pod. Leave us a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review. We want to make sure that we're growing this community, making it bigger and bigger. And until next time, thank you from myself, from Dre Cordero, from Paramount Plus, our brothers from another mother, and then, of course, our producer, Des Norris, and then Jimmy Conrad, who dipped on us. We'll forgive him for this time because things were getting a little bit heated. And until next time, guys, thank you so much, and we will see you guys later.